Good morning, everyone. Look at that. Our backyard, we had a live view of the bird feeder. I know that's what you've been waiting for. Let me just do this and do this. Take that off and publish, publish, publish. Sorry, local 4th of July parade. We missed last week because I was filming the local 4th of July parade. Back on schedule now. Final Cut TV and coffee. We're talking about, of course, Final Cut Pro, although the name of the show is not Final Cut Pro TV, it's just Final Cut TV. That's an important distinction to make. We'll be talking about things besides just Final Cut Pro. Although Final Cut Pro dominates these broadcasts. It dominates the broadcast. So I got my new Lumix, my Lumix S5 Mark II X. This is the X version, which is dedicated to, it has more professional video features versus just live, photography features. This thing is phenomenal. I really, really like this. Now, this is my first full frame camera, and I'm in the process. I have 2 prime lenses for this thing. I have a 24 millimeter f1.8 prime, and I have a 50 millimeter f1.8 prime for that. But I'm going to get a zoom. I have to have a zoom lens. So I'm going to get I was going to get the 24 to 70, Sigma 24 to 70 zoom lens. But that thing is so heavy. It's so much heavier than these prime lenses, and it's much bigger. So instead of getting the 24 to 70, I'm going to get the 28. Sigma makes a 28 to 70, which is much smaller and half the weight of the 24 to 70. If I need 24 millimeter, I have my 1.8 prime. The Sigma lens is 2.8, f2.8. So that's the prime lens that I'm looking at getting. I think we're live everywhere, right? Let me just check one thing real. Okay, now we're going to try one more. Try once more. Hold on a second. Let me just do this. I'm going to try this one more time. Now we're going to try. Okay, I think we're good. We got our first comment here this morning. It's from IFX Productions. Good morning. How you doing? How are you doing? IFX, where are you located? I'm not even sure what part of the world you're located in. So we're going to talk about, there's been a lot of discussion, the future of Final Cut Pro. And I understand exactly why the discussion is going on. We're going to talk about different aspects of the future of Final Cut Pro. We're going to talk about anything else Final Cut Pro related. We have a couple of other things that we're going to talk about. Talk a little bit about Final Cut on the iPad, but not too much. And we got some other things to talk about as far as Final Cut goes. So if you have any questions or any concerns about Final Cut, if your opinion on the future of Final Cut, go ahead and put them in the comments and I'll put them on screen. Let me see. My name is Richard Taylor. Let me put that up there. Oh. Preview mode. I'm going to put this over here. Publish. There we go. Back to live mode. IFX Productions says we are in Quebec, Canada for the very first time. We are considering other NLEs. Discussion started. Okay, you're just considering other NLEs. Well, I think that's always a good case. Even when Final Cut Pro is cruising along very, very smoothly, I would like people to consider other NLEs. There's no reason in this day and age just to stick with one NLE. I mean, you have Premiere, Avid, Resolve, DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut Pro are the main four that I see people using in different professional aspects. So you should always learn more than one. Now, if you're not going to work in Hollywood, there's really no reason to work with Avid. Avid is one of the ones I wouldn't do. But Final Cut and DaVinci Resolve, absolutely. Absolutely. It doesn't hurt to learn more than one NLE, so consider. But if you're going to switch your company over, that's what I'd be curious about. Matthew says, what's good? I'm not sure what's good. This live stream in the audience is what's good for today. Coffee, it's early. Well, 10 o'clock's pretty early for me. So we have, like I said, I missed last week because I was filming the local 4th of July parade. And I streamed it live. Then I did when I stream live, I also download the video file to my phone at the same time. There's a streamed version, then there's a local version. So I took the local version and I did a greatest hits version of it. Well, I also did some interviews before the parade and I incorporated those into the live stream. So we're here to talk about Final Cut Pro this morning. What's the future of Final Cut Pro? I am not sure. Matthew says, the next Apple event is what, September, October? So the iPhone event will be in September, most likely. That's usually when they put it out. So that'll be an interesting event. I'll get the iPhone 15 Pro Max regardless. I have the 14 Pro Max and I really like it, but I'm tired of this Lightning port for one thing. The slow speed of transferring files from it is just ridiculous. You pay $1,500 for a phone and they have a Lightning port with USB 2 speed. So September will be the iPhone. Now, there's been rumors they're going to have a periscope lens, which allows them to be, which allows them to have a more powerful lens. They're going to USB-C this year. They should be, yes. That's what everybody's saying. They have to in Europe, so why not give it to everybody else? But it's not just USB-C or /Thunderbolt. It's also the port has to have the high transfer speed. So it's a two-tier operation there. So yes, that's what I'm expecting. Perhaps a periscope lens, they said, which will allow 4, 5, 6 times optical zoom, which is what I'm looking forward to. If they improve the video of the iPhone, I'm in. If they just improve the calling and some other stuff, that doesn't really bother me. One of the things that I really liked with Final Cut for iPad, they enabled the Pro Camera, what they're calling the Pro Camera. And I've seen a lot of people say, oh, I hope they have that on the iPhone 15 Pro. It's already there. Those features are already in the phone. You do not need an iPhone 15 Pro to get those features because there's half a dozen Pro camera apps that have those features. It's not just Final Cut for iPad, which I'm sorry, I'm not going around filming with this big clunky iPad. That's just ridiculous to me to do that, especially when my phone has a better camera and better lenses and better options. My phone, this is what I want to film with. I don't want to be filming with a big piece of rectangular thing moving around and zooming and stuff. No, I don't want to film with that. So the idea they have the Pro Cam features in Final Cut for iPad so far only is ridiculous. Apple can put those features in iPhone 13 and iPhone 14 and iPhone 15. And to be honest with you, I like the Pro Camera app a lot because it has live switching. I can switch lenses while I'm recording. Unlike Filmic Pro has 4 or 5 steps that you have to take in order to switch a lens for recording. You have to stop the recording, you got to go to a menu, you got to select a lens, you got to get out of the menu, and then you have to start recording again. The Final Cut Pro, the Apple native camera app, press record, you can switch lenses as much as you want. Boop, switch, switch. And there's a couple of other Pro Cam apps. When I say Pro Cam apps, it means you have access to white balance, you have access to ISO, you have access to your f-stop and things like that. There's a bunch of camera apps that already have access to these features that Final Cut for iPad camera, Pro Camera has. Apple can absolutely put those features in existing iPhones. Put it in the regular camera app or even have a Pro Cam version. I wouldn't mind paying $199, $299 for a Pro camera from Apple, as long as you continue. Don't take away features now. Do not take away the ability to record, switch lenses, cameras while recording. That's one of the main reasons I use it. Just cut another short film on Final Cut Pro. Maybe I'm just so used to it, but it all went smoothly. Oh, of course it goes smoothly. The idea that it wouldn't go smoothly is not an issue because it'll go smoothly exactly the same way it's been going smoothly for the last 4 years. Nothing's changed in that regard. Matthew says, yeah, iPad filming is gimmicky. It just looks clunky going around. I can't imagine going around with this big iPad trying to film people. No, the little camera's fine. Or this one. This one's okay too. But this is a real camera, not a big iPad. It's just too bizarre. It's too clunky. Now, if you're in a studio setting, that's different. But I do a lot of run and gun, and I have it in my hand. I'm not going up to somebody holding an iPad in front of me. That's just ridiculous. Have you tested the Road Capture app? Interesting you said that. I just recommended that this morning to somebody. When I do, let me pull that up. When I get, let me pull that up real quick. It's a really cool little app. And let me just do this. So let's do this. Countdown desktop. Okay, cookies. So this is the Rode camera app that's out. It's called Rode Capture for video, Pro Video and Audio Recording app. It's free. Okay, it's free. One of the reasons I recommended it this morning is because you can record 2 cameras are better than 1. You can record the front, 2 different cameras on your iPhone, front and back at the same time, and you have a choice of burning it in as a picture-in-picture, or you can record to separate apps. Once again, it's free. Double Take, which I've been using for a long time, is now subscription only. I'm grandfathered in because I got it for free years ago when it first came out. So I use that a lot. but I would not pay a subscription for it under no circumstances, nor would I pay for the subscription for Filmic Pro, a ridiculous $50 a year to use a little camera app. BS. What a bunch of nonsense that is. There's half a dozen pro cam apps that are one-time purchase fee. That Rode one is free. Moment has one. A whole bunch of other people have them. Same kind of features. You don't need the Filmic Pro, $50 a year. It's just absolutely nonsense that they started doing that. But anyway, let's try. All of a sudden, my iPhone 14 Pro Max camera broke. Message that it can't confirm the camera is an original camera part. That's bizarre. You didn't switch any parts out on it or anything? See, when I got my camera, I have the Apple Care. I keep the Apple Care going. I can't, it has theft and loss. I can't be bothered with, I use that camera so much, I can't be bothered with having any issues with it. So anyway, September, the original question was September, October for Apple event. Yes, September probably for the iPhone event. They might show Final Cut Pro. I'm not worried about that specifically for that event, but the camera itself, I'll definitely be getting an iPhone 15 Pro Max. So let's look at this. This is one of the reasons that we got started this discussion. Look, everybody's talking about the future of Final Cut Pro. I mean, everybody, I see it all over the place constantly. I see videos and future of Final Cut Pro. But this week we had this article that came out. Well, not this week. Larry Jordan, what's the future of Final Cut Pro? Underwhelming was the word Joe used to describe 10.6.6 update. Well, the 10.6.6 update is not a full feature update. It's just a little update. But Larry had some other interesting things to say. Let me pull this text up a little bit. After all, Apple's talk about listening to users and their pride in their future roadmap of Final Cut Pro, the best they could do was color conform. So that letter that Apple wrote about the future of Final Cut Pro, they have not lived up to the contents of that letter. This is one of the things that's aggravating about Apple. First off, if you're going to respond to the letter, do it with actions. Words are empty unless they're followed up with actions. So just putting a little press release, oh, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do this, which is what they did. They've done one of the things. They are having meetings with people in Hollywood. At least they've had some meetings. How does that affect the rest of the Final Cut Pro users? The 5 million Final Cut Pro editors. How does that benefit us? It doesn't benefit us at all because the meetings are secret, little secret meetings that they're having about Hollywood. That doesn't benefit the rest of us. Follow up with actions. Don't follow up with just, a little letter and press release that you don't follow up on. So this is what Larry says. He doesn't think Apple knows what to do with Final Cut, nor does it know what to do with the high-end video market or the video creators that work there. So, he says, to Apple's credit, engineering can continue to support the software, bugs get fixed, new operating systems get supported, the occasional feature gets released. Occasional new feature. Very occasional. Very occasional. Since Final Cut Pro 10.5, we've had very few features added. We've had a few, but nothing like 10.0 to 10.4. We had major features. Resolve leaves them in the dust. And people say, oh, people worry about features. Of course we're worried about features. There's 100 features that Final Cut Pro 10 needs. That a lot of them are standard features that have been requested forever and ever and ever. It took Final Cut Pro 12 years to get dupe detection, for example. That's way too long. Industry standard dupe detection, it took you 12 years. Something's wrong there. Something's wrong that takes that long to get an industry standard feature. Expanding compound clips directly in the timeline instead of going to zipping somewhere else that has no relationship to the main timeline. Why can't that be done now? There's features missing from Final Cut Pro 7 that we never got back. Final Cut Pro 7 had a mixing board. Did you know that? It did. The audio in Final Cut Pro 10, well, first off, people compare Final Cut Pro 10 sometimes to digital audio workstations. Final Cut Pro 10 is not a digital audio workstation. I don't expect it to be. I don't expect it to have all the features of Logic. But having some basic features, 12 years and we don't have a master volume control in Final Cut Pro 10, that seems ridiculous to me. So it needs a lot of basic things, nuts and bolts features that it should have, that it doesn't have. This is what the article is talking about. But implementing long-standing user requests or fixing age-old bugs, not so much. When you compare the feature evolution of Final Cut to either Adobe Premiere or Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut is left behind in the dust. Left behind in the dust. Now, let me go back to here. What did I do there? Here we go. So, what does that mean for Final Cut Pro users? I still use Final Cut Pro. It's the one that I go to most often. But it's like buying a car. Okay, I bought this car, this Final Cut Pro application 12 years ago. I'm not going to just stop using my car because other cars have better features, more advanced features, and other cars are newer. I'm not going to just throw Final Cut Pro 10 away, but I wouldn't mind. I have bought another car. I have bought DaVinci Resolve Studio, and I use that. Text-based editing. Okay, NAB, Resolve came out with text-based editing, and so did Premiere Pro. Final Cut, it can't do text-based editing? If it can't do these things, something's wrong with the code and they should abandon it and get better code. Some more comments. I think AI is the future of a new editing era. DaVinci and Adobe caught on very quickly. Why didn't Apple embrace AI features or new features? The same team that develops Final Cut Pro must also work on Siri. Well, Siri's not. Siri's ridiculous, isn't it? In 2023, it's had been out for all these years, and it doesn't work properly, and it's very clunky. I don't know. Listen, I had a lot of faith in Apple, and I still do have some faith, and I still do have faith in Final Cut Pro. But my expectations are very low for Final Cut Pro at this point. My expectations are way down here. So for the last 2 or 3, let's say 3 or 4 years, the Final Cut Pro team, since 2019, the Final Cut Pro team have met my low expectations for what I expect out of Final Cut Pro. Now, on the other hand, DaVinci Resolve, they exceed my expectations. My DaVinci Resolve expectations are like in mid-level, and they always exceed them. They go above and beyond what I expect. But Final Cut Pro expectations are way down here because that's what they've shown us in the real world. Hopefully, they're working on a new version of Final Cut Pro. Hopefully, a new version. We've heard it before, built from the ground up on new foundations, blah, 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 blah. Hopefully that's what they're doing. Then that would be interesting. There's no reason why Final Cut should have AI caption subtitles. AI cut silence mixer. It shouldn't have, you mean? Shouldn't, yeah. You mean shouldn't have those. It's especially when, Apple's so worried about, being, accessible to everybody and things. These are just basic features that everybody else has. So at this point, when Final Cut finally releases, look, Final Cut will have text-based editing. But they're following other NLEs. They're following DaVinci Resolve. They're following Premiere Pro. And don't tell me that they've been working on Final Cut for the iPad, okay? That's not an excuse that I accept at all. That's complete baloney. Final Cut for the iPad is an entry-level NLE. Entry-level. We heard for years, what is Final Cut Pro doing? That letter was about, what is Final Cut Pro doing to attract Hollywood editors, high-end filmmakers, high-end people? Did Final Cut for the iPad win those people over? No. It might have done the opposite. They might have said, look, we told you Final Cut wasn't professional. Look, they put it out a version for the iPad for $4.99 a month. That doesn't help get you in the high-end market. Now, I'm not saying that getting in the high-end market is that critical. It's not. It's a very tiny, albeit important market, but it's not that important to Final Cut. What's important to Final Cut is taking care of the 5 million editors that are using it right now. The editors in Hollywood, 10,000 maybe, versus 5 million. So I don't expect Apple to bow down to Hollywood. No, yes, we're going to take care of all the people in Hollywood, Schmollywood. They can join in with everybody else. They can join in with the YouTubers. They can join in with college students and high school students that use Final Cut. Join in and get some features. Yes, dupe detection was a nice one. That benefits everybody. So if something benefits everybody, I'm all for it. And I'm not against Hollywood. I'm just saying they're not going to dedicate all their, 12 years. How much have they dedicated to Hollywood? Not that much. They're more dedicated toward YouTube and places, but YouTube gets more views than Hollywood. YouTubers get more views than Hollywood does. So, yes, it's nice to have an Emmy or Oscar, whatever the heck they give in Hollywood these days, saying edit in Final Cut Pro. That's fine. But not 100%. Give the proportionate amount. 2%, 3%, 5%. That's fine. But there's lots of nuts and bolts things that Final Cut Pro is missing. So let's go back to the desktop here. Now, it may be that Apple has great plans for the future, but since Apple doesn't publicly discuss its roadmap, we can judge of the future what's happening and what's happened in the past. And for the past 3 years, that isn't a lot. I'd say for the past 4 years, since 10.5, I was expecting 10.5 to be announced at the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit in 2019, and it was not. It was not. So we have this. Recut is a fantastic one-time purchase if you need something to cut silence. There you go. So one of the things that people were saying about Final Cut for iPad, $4.99 a month. Who can't afford $4.99 a month, $4.99 a month? It's not about the $4.99. It's about the subscription model. You have to pay for the rest of your life. You can never stop. If let's just compare $4.99 a month to what Final Cut Pro cost. If you bought Final Cut Pro in June 21st in 2011, and you kept it all, if you bought it, you have it all this time, it's cost $2.08 a month. $2.08 a month is all it's cost you if you bought it when it first came out. That's less than half the price of Final Cut on the iPad, which is a better investment. Well, Final Cut on desktop. if you bought it when it first came out. Now, of course, if you bought it more recently, then you don't get the benefit of $2.08 a month. Not much happening over there at the bird feeder, it looks like. So anyway, Final Cut, the future of Final Cut. Am I worried about the future of Final Cut Pro on the desktop? I'm not overly worried about it because I have other places that I can go if it gets to the point where it doesn't, I don't want to use it anymore. Let's just say that. But I still use it because of, there's features that I really like about it. One of the things that DaVinci Resolve doesn't have is the ability to save effects presets. I really like that ability. Of course, the magnetic timeline, I use that all the time. When I drag clips around, I want clips that are attached to it most of the time to go with me. Now, if you're used to LumaFusion, which is available on an M1 Apple Silicon Mac, if you bought it for the iPad or iPhone, it's also available for the Apple Silicon Mac. They have an advanced or an enhanced magnetic timeline. They have a magnetic timeline. People were saying, well, doesn't Apple patent that? No. A magnetic timeline. They have a magnetic timeline, and they call it the magnetic timeline, but they called it an enhanced magnetic timeline because you can lock tracks above the timeline. So you can lock this track, lock this clip, and it stays put. So when you do an edit in the timeline, you have control over which clips go with your edit and which don't. So I like the magnetic timeline for the most part. It's hard for me either I go into Resolve once in a while, and it's hard for me to use it because it doesn't have the magnetic timeline feature. Apple still pushes Final Cut and Logic every time someone purchases a new Mac during the spec area on their site. Just they wish they'd act like they care a little bit. Well, I'm not sure. You know, the Final Cut Pro team, I'm sure, cares a lot about it. I don't know how much Apple in general are that concerned about Final Cut Pro, but they certainly should be. Don't let us down, that's for sure. Do not let us down. So let's go over here. Speaking. So this is when Final Cut was introduced, 12 years ago.
So the next question is, of course, what's next? I'm sure that's really why you're all here. So now we're going to start unveiling a sneak peek of the next version of Final Cut Pro. And to help me with that task, I'm going to invite onto the stage Pete Steinau, who is the architect of the new version of Final Cut Pro.
Final Cut Pro. This is a rebuilt application built from the ground up, re-architected based on modern technologies.
Yeah, we heard all that back in those days. That was 12 years ago. But I don't think Final Cut's lived up to its name. I mean, it did for the first through 10.4. It was doing pretty good, and I really liked it. It took a long time. You know, at the beginning they said, oh, color board. No, 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 you don't need color scopes. Use color board. Color board, color board. That's what they said. And then they gave us scopes because scopes are what professionals use. Now you have the color board and you have color scopes. 12 years. I remember hearing somebody from the Final Cut Pro team says, well, why do you want dupe detection? This was years ago. We've heard the request for dupe detection. Why do you want dupe detection? Tell us why it's beneficial. No, Apple, listen to editors. We are telling you we want dupe detection. You figure out how to incorporate it, and you figure out, don't worry about We have to explain everything that we want to the nth degree. It's an industry standard feature in NLEs. It took you 12 years, 11 years, it came out last year, to give us an industry standard dupe detection. It's not up to us to explain every single thing that we want. Look at the industry. Look at the features that other NLEs have that people use and say, how can we incorporate that in Final Cut Pro? Text-based editing is a perfect example. You're behind the curve now. Resolve has it, Premiere has it. Now, like I said, I still use Final Cut Pro as my main NLE. It's the first thing I grab when I go, but I've been using it since version 1 when it first came out, all through, up to version 7, and then I went to 10.0, and now I'm up to 10.6.6. I've been using it all those years, so I'm very familiar with how it works. I have thousands, 1,500, approaching 2,000 plugins for Final Cut Pro that I use and I like. So I'm going to keep on going to Final Cut Pro, even if I use DaVinci Resolve, which I'm using now, even if I use LumaFusion. Those are the 3 NLEs that I'm using. Final Cut Pro, primarily, DaVinci Resolve, second desktop, LumaFusion on the iPad, which works on my older iPad, versus only new iPads that Final Cut for iPad does. So I have those 3, that's plenty, and then I use Logic quite extensively. So what else do we have here? We got a lot of stuff to talk about. Let me know what you think is the future of Final Cut. So we got that. So one of the things about Final Cut for iPad that's a little bit, the $4.99 subscription model. Apple gives away apps for free. macOS, iOS, tvOS, iPadOS, Keynote, Notes, Safari, Pages, Numbers. Their camera app is given away for free. iMovie, GarageBand. These are all given away for free. Do they cost Apple money? Of course they have development teams for all those apps. They're paying their salaries, but they're all given away for free. So the idea that Final Cut for the iPad charges you $4.99 a month for the rest of your life, you can never stop paying if you want to use it. That's what I don't like. If Final Cut for iPad had the option to buy it outright, that would be better. I'm not going to get it either way because I don't have an iPad that'll run it. I don't even think I would get it in the future, but I might. If I got a new iPad, I'd certainly try it out, but I'm not getting an iPad. I'm not planning on it. Final Cut Pro 7 met the needs of professional editors. Final Cut Pro 10 is aimed at a different audience, and some of us are beginning to realize that we are not part of the new target audience. Well, I agree with that statement. It's not, Final Cut Pro 10 is not the professional market. The high-end professional market is not the bullseye. It's somewhere out in the target, but not the bullseye. The bullseye is YouTubers, students, maybe documentary filmmakers, event filmmakers, the much broader 5 million users that it has. I understand that. I think that Hollywood and high-end filmmaking are on the general target, but just not the bullseye in the center. Eric says, future, more drip, drip, drip of features and fixes, no reason to think anything else. Based on actions, Eric, I agree with you. Based on their action, I agree with you. But don't you hope that there's something coming up? I mean, I don't want this Final Cut that you just bolt on a feature here and bolt on a feature here and bolt on a feature here. No, I'm hoping that the Final Cut Pro team's working on a brand new version. They're going to throw the old code out, start a brand new app for Final Cut, whether it's probably Final Cut 11. I would imagine that would be Final Cut 11. You have to buy it. Maybe they'll offer both. Philip Hodges was on the show a couple weeks ago, And he said that in order to do a subscription and a purchase of an app, you got to have two apps on the App Store. You got to have two versions, one for the subscription, one to buy it outright. So that's okay. Apple has over $3 trillion by market capitalization. Okay? They can afford to pay somebody to write two versions. But he says, for example, Final Cut on the App Store and the Final Cut Pro trial on the App Store are two different versions of the app. They're two different apps. They're not the same version. One has a trial stamped on it. So that's what you'd have to do, but that's okay. Do that. Do that. Give us a, for the Final Cut for iPad I'm talking about, give us a subscription if you want to do that, which is fine, but give people the ability to buy it outright as well. That's what I'd like to see. I'm not a user of it. I have Final Cut for the Mac, which I'm going to stick with. Let me see something here. All right, so let's go back to desktop. Here is my website, FCPX.tv, and I'll be keeping that. So we have Happy Birthday. So here we have Master List Final Cut for the iPad. So these are all the articles I have. Final Cut for iPad, Master List, dozens and dozens and dozens of links to articles, and plenty of tutorials, dozens. I think there's like 50 different items here on this Final Cut for iPad. I think there's like 50. Let's go back to the main page. But this is what I wanted to show you. Feature parity checklist, Final Cut Pro versus Final Cut for iPad. How many things do you think Final Cut for iPad is missing compared to Final Cut for the Mac? We're up to 40. Feature parity checklist, Final Cut Pro versus Final Cut for iPad. By the way, if you want to join our Final Cut for iPad Tips and Tricks Facebook group, you can join it there. There's a click on it. Differences between Final Cut Pro and Final Cut for iPad. And I'll update this list as I'm notified. So these are the missing features on Final Cut for iPad. No editing off external drive, subscription only, no white balance. Did you realize that? No white balance, no stabilization. No color board, color wheels, color curves, use saturation curves. Only one scope at a time, no multiple scopes. No audio sub-rolls and only 3 audio rolls. Only 1 video roll. No optimized media. Can't import ranges from connected SD cards, etc., etc., etc. These are all the things. No info inspector, no timeline index, no custom browser layouts, no comparison viewer. I knew that Final Cut for the iPad would not have feature parity with Final Cut for the Mac, and this is just to show that. Now, this is not to say that I don't like Final Cut for the iPad. I'm glad it's out, but it's not the same as Final Cut for the Mac, period. It's not the same. I don't expect it to be the same. What about Lumberjack Final Cut Pro app? Anybody tried it yet? It's for text-based editing. I think it might still be on sale. I just onlined another feature film on Final Cut Pro and cannot be happy with the result. Nobody's debating that, Yari. Nobody's debating that. But Final Cut, Yari, tell me the last innovative feature that Final Cut for the Mac has. Tell me the last innovative feature. How many years has it been since there's been an innovation in Final Cut? You have to understand the frustration of the 5 million users. Some of the 5 million users that Final Cut has, the lack of innovation. Tell me the last thing that Final Cut did that was innovative. I don't even know. Dupe detection wasn't it. Dupe detection the other NLEs have had it forever and forever. So Apple followed NLEs to put dupe detection in it, and they were dragging their feet for years to incorporate dupe detection. Color wheels. How long did it take to get color wheels? See, they kept saying, no, the color board, the color board, the color board. And the users kept saying, no, color wheels, color wheels, color wheels. And they drug their feet, and they finally gave us color wheels. We don't need that kind of resistance from the Final Cut Pro team. They should listen more to the editors they have. Of course you can cut a feature in Final Cut. We know that. Of course. I'm still using Final Cut. I use it all the time. But am I going to say that it's the most innovative NLA out there? No. The innovation has stopped for years. It's been stagnated. So it just needs so many things. Basic features that it doesn't have. But I still use it. I still use it for multiple reasons. Number one, I have all these years of experience. Absolutely. But there's features. You wouldn't like a mixing board in Final Cut? I would. I absolutely would. Let me pull this up. So this is what I'm talking about. These are all the top requests for Final Cut Pro in 2023. Don't forget, give me a thumbs up. You're watching the show. Give me some thumbs up there. Always appreciated. Pro audio features, audio mixer with master volume control, project improvements. Do you realize that you can't scrub a project in Final Cut Pro in the browser? You can't scrub it. You can scrub a compound clip. You can scrub a multicam clip. You can scrub regular clips. And you can scrub a project in the share menu. But you can't scrub a project in the browser. Thanks for the thumbs up. Appreciate it. You can't scrub a project in the browser. I'd like to see that. Project in the browser. Here's some other things. Better keyframing options. Who doesn't want better keyframing options? Native BRAW support. Yes, we have a plugin that can do that now, but I'd like to see better BRAW support. Do you realize it takes 5 clicks to change the default export share option in Final Cut? 5 clicks. Should be 1 click. Right click and save it right there. Adjustable secondary and primary storyline parameters in the inspector. Compound clips expand for editing in place in the timeline. Now, who doesn't want that? Right now, you got to double click on it. It takes you to another timeline that has no relationship to where you are in the main timeline. Effects, transitions, browser improvements, online store where you could search for a demo, buy plugins, effects, titles, etc., etc. Wouldn't you like to see that? Batch sync audio and video clips. Batch sync. I'd like to see a keyframeable opacity bar with fade handles on the video clips in the timeline the way the audio clips have. Just right there, you grab it and you do the fade handles and an opacity bar. Just right there, you have it right there. Thanks for the thumbs up, appreciate it. Let's see what else we have. Text-based editing, searchable video, audio transcriptions. More colors, color coding, sort by color for video clips, audio clips, like Logic. This is Final Cut Pro's earthy, crunchy, California style colors. This is Logic's beautiful palette of colors. give the users the options that they want. Select multiple edit points instead of just one at a time. We've gotten some of the things from this list. A master file browser would be nice, where you can go all over your Mac. I'd like to be able to drag a customized effect from the inspector to a clip, select the clips in the timeline or events browser. Just take this, grab it here, and just drag it down to the timeline, but you can't do that right now. I mean, you know, once again, Final Cut's my main NLE. I use it all the time, but it needs a lot of things to. It's really falling behind. If you look at the development of Final Cut of Resolve, and you have to see. I mean, yes, Yari used it for another feature film, and he says it's been fine. I understand that, but it's plateaued. The development of Final Cut Pro has plateaued since 2019. The development has stalled. So could you do a feature up to that point? Sure. What have you got? Tell me what's been innovative in Final Cut for the last 4 years. Tell me some innovation that's done. So Don says, I'm finishing 3 features now, waiting on B-roll, and about 1/3 into a 4th feature. Final Cut always works, no issues, would love text-based editing and captions. Well, this is what I'm saying. Now when they add text-based editing and captions, people are going to say, well, you're following Resolve and Premiere. They've already had it. I don't know what the problem is. I know a lot of people have left the team in the last 3 or 4 years. Thanks for the thumbs up, by the way. Appreciate it. Appreciate the thumbs up. Speaking of thumbs up, don't forget to subscribe over there at YouTube so you're notified when we go live. Don't forget, subscribe and click that notification bell and give me the old thumbs up. So one of the other things that we're going to talk about, Final Cut, the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit. There should be an announcement soon about the Creative Summit, and that typically happens in the fall, in November in the fall. So last year they had the Global Summit. They went to 5 different cities. They never got overseas, and they went around, and I think they had a couple dozen people show up at each place. And I probably wasn't what they were expecting. They were probably expecting 40 to 50 to 60. The Creative Summit itself has 150, 200, has 150, 200 people participating. I'm expecting the Creative Summit, I've been saying this for months, I'm expecting the Creative Summit to return to Cupertino this fall. And typically they make an announcement in July and August, because people have to make, if there's going to be an in-person one, people have to make reservations. They got to take time off from work, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm expecting it this year. So let's see what happens. Hopefully there's going to be some good stuff coming with the Creative Summit. Apple should have at least mentioned at the last WWDC a sentence that leads us to believe that their team is currently working on something incredible. Yeah, there's no reason not to. They know the frustration of the users, the editors that use Final Cut. They know the frustration. The team might not be able to say things, but we don't know what's going on. They certainly should be able to say what's going on. Hey, we're working on a new version of Final Cut. In the meantime, use the old version, use Final Cut on the iPad, whatever you want to say. But it's a little frustrating. So what do I think's happening? I don't know what's happening, obviously. But I'm hoping, here's what I'm hoping is happening. I'm hoping they're working on a brand new version. I don't want to see bolt on to this old code. This code is 12 years old. It's going on 13 years old now. Just bolt on features on top of that, bolt on features. Hopefully they're working on a brand new version. That's what I'm hoping on. Maybe it's written in Swift, whatever the newest code language is. Not much activity out there. You can see it's very, very green. But I'm hoping they're working on a brand new version. Hoping they're working on it. Where was that? That's my coffee. Hopefully they're working on a brand new version of Final Cut. That's what I'm hoping. Thank you for the thumbs up. It's appreciated. And hopefully I can do these most Saturdays over the summer. Maybe not every Saturday, but so far I've only missed one, which was last week. So some people say, I see them online, they say, oh, I'm going to drop Final Cut Pro and go work on Resolve. Well, don't drop it. You don't have to drop it. You know, you've already paid for it. You might as well use it some of the time. But, if somebody come up to me, I was the pro supervisor at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. We put on over 100 live events every year. In the theater, we multicam them. I would do the post-editing of the multi-cameras. They would stream it live, but I would go back a lot of times and make a better version, edited version. And if I was suggesting to people that were coming up in the industry now, what NLE they would use, that would be a tough one. That would be, if I'm being honest, that would be a tough one. I can't recommend Final Cut by itself. The good thing about Final Cut and Resolve both are they have a one-time fee. Well, Resolve has a free version, which is very, very powerful. So I would say try out Resolve. See if you like Resolve for free. You don't have to commit to it. You can use the free version forever. There's not as a 30-day limit or a 60 or 90-day limit. You can continue to use the free version forever. Okay? If you find that you like it and need the extra features like the captioning, they have captioning now, upgrade to the studio version for $299. Final Cut is the same kind of a thing. If I was up and coming, I would not base my editing career on Final Cut Pro because there's not enough jobs out there. Most of the jobs say Premiere, Avid, other things. But I still recommend Final Cut as an option. I wouldn't say only Final Cut. I would say, personally, I would say Premiere. I would say, no, I would not say Premiere. I don't like the Adobe subscription model. I would say DaVinci Resolve. Try it for free. Get your feet wet in the editing world. Learn it. Resolve Blackmagic has tons of resources for learning DaVinci Resolve. Hands down, they're better than anybody else. Hands down. So they just like the ability to add features and update the app, leaps and bounds better than anybody else. I would say try DaVinci Resolve. I would say save up for Final Cut, although I wouldn't say that right now. I had to wait to see what Final Cut does. Because right now, Final Cut to me is 4 years old. The innovation in Final Cut for the last 4 years has not been that great. So I wouldn't recommend buying it now. I'd say, but hold off and just wait and see what happens. Do the trial of Final Cut. They have a 90-day free trial. Try that. In education, Premiere Pro seems to be the king. Let me modify that statement, Eric. In education, Adobe Photoshop is the king. And Premiere is there because the institutions have Photoshop. And maybe they have After Effects. The institutions are not buying the Adobe suite because of Premiere. They're buying the Adobe suite because of Photoshop. Premiere comes along as a free ride. So, but yes, a lot of education does, but LumaFusion works on the Chromebook. I didn't realize that. So they can be used in education a lot, and also works on an iPhone, which Final Cut for the iPad does not. It works on older iPads. Final Cut for the iPad does not. and it works on Android phones, which Final Cut for the iPad does not. It does not do that. Thanks for the thumbs up. I appreciate it. So we're gonna try to do. Thank you very much. We're gonna try to keep on doing these on Saturdays, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, something like that. If you have any more comments on the future of Final Cut, because I do these for the community, the worldwide community, to come in and chat and to voice their opinions on these. And today's episode is the future of Final Cut. I'm not confident on the future of Final Cut. I'm being honest with you. I don't know what they're doing. I'm hopeful that they have a new version coming out, version Final Cut Pro 11. That's what I'm hoping for. And until Final Cut 11 comes out, give us Final Cut 10.7 with some new features so we know things are alive. If there is an in-person Final Cut Creative Summit, Final Cut Pro Creative Summit in Cupertino this November, if there is going to be one, hopefully they have a new version, something new to show us at that point. Show us Final Cut 11. We'll keep it secret if you want us to. When they released Final Cut Pro 10.3, 10.4, and 10.4.4, all those were released right around the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit. They allowed us to talk about it all 3 times. 2019, there was nothing to talk about. So hopefully, if they have a Creative Summit this year, and I don't even care if they don't have anything, I still want an in-person Creative Summit. So that would be fantastic. Back at the Juniper Hotel. But Resolve is tempting for collaboration on LA local server. Yeah, it's very tempting for collaboration. That's one of the other big features that Final Cut doesn't have, is any kind of collaboration, which is one of the main reasons that Hollywood hasn't embraced it. Right? Absolutely. Let's watch another video. So I was in Hollywood a few years ago. Look at this. Hollywood Walk of Fame. It's a lot of chewing gum. I was kind of surprised it wasn't as clean as I thought it was going to be. But there's all kinds of things. I was in Hollywood, only there one time in my life. Charlie Chaplin, of course. I live streamed this. That event, but I wanted to show you this. So here is I have a documentary out on my YouTube channel. Here is the Creative Summit documentary. It's like 42 minutes.
You get charged more if it was more complicated.
A lot of people do.
Hey, Richard, how's it going? Pretty good. How you doing?
We interviewed lots of people. This is the place we used to eat at that's no longer there, Armadillo Willie's. It's not there anymore.
I understand Alex is on a plane right now.
There's Jeff Greenberg.
For 2.5 hours, and I had to edit that down to 45 minutes or so.
That's skill.
That's okay. That's okay.
Skill.
That's all right.
I'm sure you made me sound excellent.
This thing in Apple Campus today was so unusual.
Yes, it is.
Oh, thank you.
Don't you think?
Bless you. Thank you. Thank you.
Don't you think?
What?
It's
Yes, in very many ways.
So I interview people. It's what I do. There's Brad. Lots of things, lots of events happening.
We've all got cranial inflammation.
Yes.
When you point it over at Brad and I, it goes down.
No.
It's not a live tracker, is it?
It goes with her.
There's just some of the classrooms. They have different classes, events, and sessions and things.
You can be on camera now.
No, I just can't say anything.
Oh, yeah.
I can say thank you for letting me come.
But no, not more than that.
Oh, and that's it. That's it.
That's it.
Everything else is a secret.
And cut. Thank you.
Of course.
Hear your stories, Germany.
So if they have the Creative Summit again, that's the kind of things you're going to have in-person training. I do expect them to have virtual training this year. If they have the in-person classes, I do expect there to be a virtual, although they might not. They might say, no, you have to come in person and you can buy the package after the fact. Anyway, thanks a lot. Give me the thumbs up on the stream. I'm going to get out of here. Good morning, Richard from Encino, California with coffee in hand. I'll expect coffee right here. Thank you. And we're going to continue these over the summer. Nobody else is doing live streams with Final Cut Pro on a consistent basis, week after week after week. So we're going to continue to do these on Saturdays. Just check with the time. It could be 9, 10, or 11 Eastern time. Today worked out to be 10, but we're going to continue these. Don't forget, go over there and subscribe over there to the YouTube channel. Good old subscription, absolutely. By the way, there's a Facebook group I have, Final Cut Pro. There are iPad tips and tricks and regular Final Cut Pro for tips and tricks. Over there on Facebook, also Final Cut Radio TV on Facebook if you want to. That's where I make most of my announcements over there, Final Cut Radio TV. All right, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Give me the thumbs up. I appreciate it over there on the channel. And I will see you, hopefully, next Saturday, if not before. If there's an update to Final Cut Pro during the week, even if it's a bug fix, I'll come back on live and we will talk about it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Give me the thumbs up over there, subscribe, and I will talk to everybody later. Thanks a lot.